Pakistan, and the topic is application of machine learning in travel behavior analysis. Can we start, Sensei?
Yeah, of course. Okay, as you have already gone through my introduction, I will not waste time on that. Machine learning. Yaginuma Sensei has given a very good definition of machine learning. For me, it's a field of study that gives computer the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. So we have been talking about modeling. We have to talk about discrete choice models, logic models, mixed models, even recursive logic models. All of this is what we are teaching the computers. And then afterwards, the computer is going to, because we are teaching the computer, we're giving a structure to the computer, and then based on that structure, we are getting the predictions. But what if we only have the data and the computer can learn over the data? We need not to give a structure, we need not to give a model, rather the computer will learn itself from the data, and based on the learning, it can then predict. So this is what machine learning is in a nutshell. So a computer program is said to learn from experience E with respect to task T, and some performance measure P if its performance on T is measured as measured by P improves with experience E. Okay, it's a bit of a complex definition. Let me give you a very simple example. A doctor, a medical doctor, his practice becomes better and better with experience. Why? Because with experience, he learns, and with learning, he can predict or diagnose the disease as well as treat it accordingly. So with experience, he's learning. Similarly, your machine learning algorithm, it learns with data. You give it data, you keep giving it data, maybe big data, it keeps on learning. That is the experience based on which it is learning. And based on that experience, the machine learning algorithm is going to predict. It's going to give a certain, based on the performance measure P, it's going to achieve a task T. Very broadly speaking, the machine learning algorithms can be divided into four groups. First is the supervised learning algorithms. These are the algorithms which take up the labeled data. You provide a labeled data where the end result is provided. The algorithm learns based on that end decision or the end class. And after the learning, it can predict. Then the unsupervised learning algorithms, those are the algorithms where you don't have any labeled data. You have an unlabeled data. You provide the unlabeled data to the algorithm, and the algorithm then tries to learn certain structures or patterns within the data and then classifies it into clusters or groups. This is an unsupervised learning. Semi-supervised is somewhat in between supervised and unsupervised, where you have a big chunk of unlabeled data, you provide that to the algorithm, it learns from there, make clusters, and then you provide a very small amount of that is provided to you, the very small amount of labeled data. And based on the labeled data, it characterizes the chunks, the clusters that it has already formed. And once it has given classification to the clusters, it can predict accordingly. Lastly is the reinforcement learning or inverse reinforcement learning. It is, of course, used in robotics a lot, in autonomous vehicles. It is the main algorithm behind route choice, behind which route to take, behind even Google Maps. Then I would just quickly go through three of the very popular algorithms. Of course, I will be discussing only the supervised learning algorithms. First one is support vector machines. It is among the best off-the-shelf supervised learning algorithms. And again, its support vector machine is a two-class classifier. So it can classify between only two sets of data, two groups. But we, for example, like mode choice modeling, we have a lot of modes, not essentially two modes. For that purpose, we will go for multi-class classification. Although support vector machine is a two-class classifier, but it can deal with multi-classes using one against all and one against one classification. So when a set of training data containing class labels is supplied to SVM, it outputs an optimal hyperplane, which then classifies new examples. So what is a hyperplane? It is a barrier in between the two groups, and the optimum hyperplane is the one which maximizes the margin between or from the support vectors or the boundary points of both these groups. So you can see a hyperplane, optimum hyperplane would be the one which maximizes the margin, although you can see there can be a different number of hyperplanes within the same small area. Then support vector machines can have the assistance of kernels, and they can map the data to a higher dimension. What is the meaning of higher dimension? So in this particular example, you can very easily visualize that just going to the lower dimension, it is quite difficult to classify the data, but SPMs can map that to a higher dimension, and using that, they can very easily classify using a hyperplane. Then comes the decision trees. Decision trees repeatedly split the dataset in order to arrive at a final outcome. So what happens is it starts as an inverted tree. You start at a root, single node known as the root, starting node, split into two parts based on the features that you have. For example, for mode choice modeling, you have travel time, travel cost, ingress time, egress time, waiting time, and stuff like that. So all of these are features of variables. So at each node, the decision tree that scans through all the features, given features, and selects the one that is most suitable for making the split. And based on that feature, it makes a split. The tree then moves forward. There are now two more nodes presented or available. Each node will have another split. And this way, the tree grows in an inverted way until it reaches the terminals, or known as the leaf nodes. These are the nodes which provide you the decision class or target class. A simple example would be this decision tree, a very simple decision tree, where there are only three features: qualification, experience, and age. And based on that, the tree is formed, and at the root, it scans the three features available and thinks that, okay, qualification is the most appropriate feature to make the split. It makes a split, and then it moves forward until it reaches the terminals where you have the decision that either the employee or the candidate will be hired or not hired. Then coming to the word random forest. And since it is a forest, that means it will grow a number of trees, decision trees. When there are a number of trees, you have a number of decisions. Then it is known as random forest. Why? Because you include randomness into it. And that randomness is included at two levels. Firstly, the random forest for each tree, it will take randomly 63% of the given data, grow that tree, and then the rest 37% would be used, known as the out-of-bag data, will be used to estimate the error terms or error rates. So each decision tree will have a unique data set. Why? Because it would be taking up 63%, but randomly from the master data set. So you have a number of trees all having different data sets, a subset of the main data set. Secondly, the randomness is included at nodes where you have to make the split. Originally, I have discussed that in the decision tree, at each node, all the features are scanned, evaluated, and then the best feature for the split is taken. Whereas in random forest, within each tree, when you reach a node, you're not provided with the entire data set of the features. Rather, you're provided with a subset and a randomly selected subset, and the decision tree then has to analyze only that subset, only those limited number of features, and from there it will take up a feature and make the split. And then next node, again, there will be a randomly selected subset of the features available for making the split. So in this way, random forest, we have two levels of randomness. This helps us a lot because we need not to prune our trees. In decision tree, originally we have to prune our trees so as to save the model from overfitting. But in random forest, this is not a case. You can grow the trees to full length. Regarding the feature subset, it is usually under root k value, where k is the total number of features. For example, if you have 25 features in your data set, so at every node, a randomly selected subset of 5 features would be available to make this spread. So once you have grown the trees using the training data, and after each tree is grown, you reach a certain decision. You have, for example, 100 trees, you have 100 decisions. Out of these 100 decisions, it is a classification problem, you'll get the maximum voting. For example, it is between car, bike, and bus, and 100 trees, out of those 100 trees, 55 trees are saying that it is a car, rest are divided between bike and bus. The final decision, the final result would be car. So it would be a maximum voting mechanism.